Okay. Well, welcome, folks, to my YouTube channel, Self-Evident. And today, if Barack Hussein Obama had been president on 9/11, 9/11. Just last Tuesday was the day our lunatic boy king president threatened to obliterate Iran, to destroy Iran's power plants and bridges. Praise Allah. But when I turn on our TV to see what's being done about Trump's obvious demented state of mind, I'm hearing more outrage, more to-the-point calls for the invocation of the 25th Amendment from folks considered oftentimes far-right conspiracy theorists. These include Marjorie Taylor Greene, member of the Jewish space lasers, and even Alex Jones, Sandy Hook. There are many more, but this isn't about them, at least not in the present. We're lucky it was Taco Tuesday because Trump has put off his Old Testament fire and brimstone, make Israel great again, bombastic rhetoric for now. Maybe someone in his proximity found something gold and shiny to distract him from ordering the destruction of ancient Persia in one night. In any case, and this is an update, Israel is attacking Lebanon, so all bets are off. The ceasefire's off. Lasted a few minutes, maybe a day. A couple of things are becoming self-evident these days. Many on the right who are all in on supporting Trump, who believed his real estate salesman's words and ignored all the things folks on the left find reprehensible about him, they've seen enough. They are finally coming up to the speed in seeing Trump as an inarticulate imbecile, a scam artist, and a tool of Israel, Russia, and the billionaire bandits. That would be the PayPal bandits. The left, the Silicon Valley PayPal bandits. The left, meanwhile, have long been disgusted with the boy king, and many Democratic leaders seem to have a hard time expressing outrage as vociferously as some of those on the right are able to. I'm mostly referring to the AIPAC bitches Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. My own Washington state senators, Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell, along with House Rep Kim Schreier, are so ensconced in their ivory towers you barely hear from them, except come election time, that is. I know from my experience as a constituent, having tried to communicate with them many times and can never get past the young interns, aka the call screeners. I guess I'm going to have to disguise myself as a lobbyist. Some of my go-to podcasters, the ones I like, the YouTube stars, and even some TV personalities, are up to the task and can voice incredulous outrage when motivated, and lately that's daily. I kind of wonder where was that outrage when another demented regime plagued our planet, the George W. Bush, Dick Cheney 8-year nightmare. I get it that some of these newer commentators would have been a bit young during the G-Dub reign, but what transpired during those years was so heinous and diabolical that had people not been so afraid of being called conspiracy theorists, they would have at least dug into the events leading up to 9/11. The improbable and impossible events on the day itself and the aftermath that stretch for some 20 years if you count the Afghanistan and Iraq wars, and you have to count them. Had these things been examined, had the left shown a fraction as much outrage at the audacity of the G.W. Bush PNAC Republican right, and if you don't know what PNAC stands for, it stands for Project for the New American Century, the Republican right, and demanded more investigations, more public debate, then it is likely that Donald Trump and his murderous, ridiculous clown show of a cabinet dominated by Israeli first Zionists might never have been a factor in American politics ever again. All I have to do to prove is to juxtapose Barack Hussein Obama for George W. Bush and revisit some of those years and events. So we'll start with the 2000 presidential election, the infamous Florida recount. Now remember, the vote is close, hundreds, just comes down to hundreds. But instead of GW's brother being the Florida governor's, instead of GW's brother being the Florida governor, let's pretend Obama's brother. You're going to have to stay with me on a lot of this because I'm juxtaposing these two people. Is the Florida governor. So now we're going to have Obama's brother is going to be the Florida governor. The swing state vote was close enough to trigger an automatic recount. And some of us remember Mr. Bug Eyes and the Hanging Chad ballots. Without getting into detail, the recount went all the way to the right-wing bias Supreme Court, where they decided the Florida system violated the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. So think of the outrage if Democratic Obama was awarded the presidential election by a Democratic biased Supreme Court only after his Democratic Florida governor brother helped to stop the Florida recount. Considering the obsessive hate so many on the right have for black Hussein Obama, there would have been a Chernobyl-level meltdown. But very tepid response on the left. So now we cruise along a year later. 4 U.S. commercial jets are hijacked by Muslim terrorists led by Osama bin Laden. 15 of the 19 hijackers come from Saudi Arabia, an OPEC member, and enlist in U.S. aviation schools, and one of them is heard saying he doesn't need to learn how to land, only to fly. No alarm bells go off in Barack Hussein Obama's domestic security apparatus, so the terrorists are free to carry out their mission. The 4 planes are hijacked. The first plane hits the North Tower of the Twin Towers. The second hits the South Tower. The third hits the Pentagon. And the fourth crashes into Pennsylvania. Not one plane was intercepted under Democratic President Barack Hussein Obama. No military interdiction of any kind. Meanwhile, Barack Hussein Obama was reading a book, My Pet Goat, to children at Emma Booker Elementary School in Sarasota, Florida. An aide whispered to him about the attack. Obama gets a funny look and continues reading, somehow knowing he was not in danger. So there's no choice but to hunt down the evildoers all the way to Afghanistan and wage war against the Taliban. Okay, now we need to back up a little. I guess we're going to have to start well before the beginning. Back in 1989, just after Ronald Reagan in 1987 told Gorbachev to tear down this wall. The Soviet Union dissolved into Russia and the satellite states. They were former countries, former city-states, before that former kingdoms, and even the Persian Empire. In 1990, Obama's father, stay with me, George H.W., began Operation Desert Shield and then went to war with Iraq in Operation Desert Storm in order to liberate Kuwait from an Iraqi invasion. The people of the United States were not hip to getting involved in a war between 2 Middle Eastern countries. That is, not until their emotions got triggered by a Manhattan strategic communications company, Hill and Knowlton. They devised a strategy. Now, this is directly from Wikipedia. The Naira testimony was false testimony given before the United States Congressional Human Rights Caucus on October the 10th, 1990 by a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl who was publicly identified only as Naira at the time and presented herself as having been a volunteer nurse at the Kuwaiti hospital at the time of the Iraq invasion of Kuwait. In her testimony, which took place 2 months after the invasion, she claimed to have witnessed Iraq soldiers taking premature babies out of the incubators in a maternity ward before looting the incubators, and I don't even know what that means, looting the incubators. But anyways, and leaving the babies to die on the floor. Naira's statements were widely publicized and cited numerous times in the United States Senate and by American President H.W. Bush, Obama's dad, remember, work with me, to contribute to the rationale for pursuing military action against Iraq. Her portrayal of Iraq war crimes was aimed at further increasing global support for Kuwait against the Iraq occupation during the Gulf War, which resulted in the expulsion of Iraq troops from Kuwait by a 42-country coalition led by the United States. This is still from Wiki. In January 1992, it was revealed that Naira had never been a nurse and that she was the daughter of Saud Nasser al-Saud al-Sabah, the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. At the time the testimony was made, she and her father were members of the House of Sabah, the ruling family of Kuwait. Furthermore, it was revealed that her testimony was organized as part of a wider public relations campaign conducted by the Kuwaiti government in exile's Citizens for a Free Kuwait, which sought to encourage American military involvement against Iraq's occupation of Kuwait through coordination with American public relations firm Hill and Knowlton. Okay, let's start adding this up. Maybe stolen election with the help of Obama's brother, a biased Democratic court, stay with me, asleep at the wheel during 9/11, 9/11. Now we find out Obama's father, the no new taxes president, falsified information, or in conspiracy theorists' terms, created a false flag event to drag the United States into war. As you can imagine, the American public, both left and right, were outraged by this deception. Okay, that's a late April Fool's joke. The right wasn't outraged because it was their guys, their party, and the left wasn't outraged because I still haven't figured out why the left is so flaccid when it comes to representing their people in their reluctance in speaking out for the truth and justice. It might have something to do with being afraid of being called conspiracy theorists, so much so that they won't even question the obvious deceptions. Or is it because these foreign excursions always seem to involve Israel's historical enemies? Or does it have something to do with those countries we choose to invade for not recognizing the global sovereignty of the US dollar? Maybe it's all three things. We won't know because the Republican people do not ask when their guys are doing the deceiving, and the Democrats don't ask, though it's the other guys doing the deceiving. A uniparty, anyone? Now back to that dastardly black man, Barack Hussein Obama, and his failure to stop 9/11, the September 11th attack, from happening. Why did they attack us? Obama's, stay with me, Bush's excuse was because they hate us for our freedoms. That's why, and if you don't believe it, you are either with us or you are against us. But alas, some deeper thinkers got into the act and said, au contraire, Osama bin Laden attacked us because Obama's dad, GHW, left Desert Storm military bases at Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and that was a no-no because the holiest of all places of Islam are in Mecca and Medina, Saudi Arabia, and that pissed off Osama bin Laden. You don't trust me? Here's another wiki entry. The dispute between Iraq and Kuwait over alleged slant drilling in the field was one of the reasons for Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990. And lo and behold, it was Obama's Vice President Dick Cheney's company, Halliburton, that was likely slant drilling from Kuwait into the Rumalia oil fields of southern Iraq. Dang that Obama, when is someone going to set that black man straight? Why no outrage? All that is adding up to some serious scandal for the black president, but he also was awarded a contract for his own oil company, Arbusto Energy, by Bahrain. This was considered an influence contract because Arbusto was in no league to play with the big oil producers of the Middle East. Obama's father, GHW, was also an oil tycoon, and oh, by the way, the former head of the CIA. And both Obama, stay with me, and his daddy were members of the secret society at Yale known as Skull and Bones. I'm surprised the world wasn't more outraged at the privilege of the uppity entitled black president. But back to 9/11, September 11th, and I don't want to try to convince you that September 11th was an inside job, only that millions upon millions of people thought it was, and still think it is, including over 3,500 licensed architects and engineers, and hundreds of PhD scholars for 9/11 truth. They all have a problem because of how the controlled media made ridiculous claims as to what caused those three buildings to fall straight down at free fall speed. 3 buildings, you ask? Yes, the media tried to pretend we didn't see WTC fall later that day. WTC 7 was also called the Solomon Building and also called the smoking gun of 9/11. But all that's for another day and for another essay. The point is, there was never any public debate on that subject, only monologues. For sake of argument, an inside job would have needed people to be on the inside. Somebody the Obama work with me and administration could trust, say another brother. Not Jeb, we've already covered him. Not Neil, of the Silverado savings and loan scandal. Yet another brother, Marvin Obama, stay with me. Not just Marvin, but Obama's cousin, Wirt Walker III, were employed by Stratasec Seracom, a Kuwaiti security firm in charge of the, wait for it, the entire WTC World Trade Center complex and the security at the airlines where the flights originated. Obama's brother in charge of security at the World Trade Center? This can't be. People would have been out of their freaking minds with outrage, with questions and protest. And much rage would have ensued when the public found out that 15 of the 19 hijackers originated from Saudi Arabia, and that the Saudi ambassador to the U.S. was Prince Bandar bin Sultan. And Prince Bandar literally stayed over at the Obama Ranch, again, stay with me on this one, in Crawford, Texas on several occasions. In fact, the prince was so cozy with the Texas oil man who became president, Obama, that they called him Bandar Obama. Again, work with me on this. Hate to do this to you, but it gets even better. The real reason those conspiracy theorists give for the attack, the false flag, was because the oil and gas companies and the pharmaceutical companies desperately wanted to get into Afghanistan so that the sent gas pipelines could be built to deliver gas and oil to world markets. The only thing stopping the construction of the TAPI pipelines, that stands for Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India pipelines, was the Taliban. The Taliban were causing major problems for the people counting the money before they even got it, including Obama's, stay with me, best friend, Kenny Boy of Enron shame. Not to get into that, but Kenny Boy built an electricity generating power plant in Dabul, India, expecting the natural gas from the Caspian Sea Basin, aka the TAPI pipeline, to be completed. This gas was going to be turned into electricity for the overpopulated and still growing India, except those darn Taliban were screwing everything up. Eventually, the power plant face-planted, Enron went broke, and the Dabul project's director, Clifford Baxter, was found dead outside his Houston gated community with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. You probably don't remember hearing much about this on the evening news, I'll bet you anything. Barack Hussein Obama has seemingly gotten away with so much so far that we must go back to the very day of the event. The Carlyle Group. September 11, 2001 was marked by a series of meetings and investments that connected the firm to the bin Laden family and the broader events of the day. Here are some key points regarding the Carlyle Group's activity. The Carlyle Group is considered an oil services company or even a military contractor, one of the bigger ones at the time. Investment in the bin Laden family. The Carlyle Group had invested $2 million in the Carlyle Partners. Now listen to this. The investment of the bin Laden family. The Carlyle Group had invested $2 million in the Carlyle Partners Fund in 1995, with the bin Laden family, Osama bin Laden's family, being relatively small investors. However, their overall investment might have been considerably larger. Well, we're not going to know because our media doesn't seem to care. The investor conference. The Carlyle Group held its annual, you got to listen to this now, held its annual investor conference on September 11th, 2001 at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Washington, D.C., the same Washington, D.C. where the plane hit the Pentagon. This meeting was attended by former President H.W. Bush, Obama's dad, stay with me on this again, and other high-profile figures, including former Secretary of State James Baker and former British Prime Minister John Major. So we have a meeting in the Carlyle Group in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel on the day of the event, and George H.W. Obama is sitting with the bin Laden family. All right. Nothing crazy about that. The firm's chairman, Frank Carlucci, was a former CIA director, of course, another CIA, and the firm's senior advisor to its Asian Partners Fund was George H.W. Bush, Obama's dad, remember? These connections were significant in the firm's business dealings and the public relations during the period. Following the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks, now this is the other thing, following the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks, the skies over the USA were shut down, no flights. However, approximately 24 members of the bin Laden family were evacuated from various locations across the United States. So we were attacked by a bin Laden, but the bin Laden family were the only people able to fly in a lockdown U.S. skies. Sure. Obama, you bastard. And whether you believe there are many unanswered questions involving the events of 9/11, that event as an excuse to invade Afghanistan, there is a general agreement, even among the college folks who avoid conspiracy theories that the Obama, stay with me, lied about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq as an excuse to go into that country again and wage war and seize the oil fields, a fact seldom reported. So let's try to keep all this in mind as all you outraged pundits, all you outraged bloggers and podcasters and influencers, you academics and TV personalities who are so finally outraged at Trump's deviant insanity. If Obama had done 1/100th of the evil George W. Bush and his Pappy Bush, George H.W. Bush, had done, we would never have had to deal with Trump, nor the radical MAGA element of the Republican Party and the look the other way Democratic Party. And that should be self-evident by now.